Welcome to the ECE Classroom Podcast with your host, Susie Beghin, inspiring early childhood educators every day. Welcome back to the ECE Classroom, the podcast where we dive deep into the world of early childhood education, parenting tips, and creative learning strategies. I'm your host, Susie Beghin, and today we have a very special guest joining us for the second time. Her name is Erica Saccoccio, and she is a motivational speaker with over 23 years experience as an entrepreneur. She is the owner as well of a multi-location child care center called Family Tree in Rhode Island. And Erica is a passionate leader in the early childhood education industry and hosts a podcast of her own called the Child Care Director's Chair Podcast. Welcome, Erica.
Thank you, Susie. I'm super excited to be invited back. Your podcast is always so insightful, so I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. So today we're going to be talking about early childhood education and leadership. But before we do that, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? Let our listeners know what inspired you to be in the early childhood education industry.
Well, I think it was more necessity. I didn't wake up one day and go, oh, I want to be a teacher. I want to run a program, which I know it happens for most folks, but that wasn't the way that mine turned out. I was all about business. Then I had my baby. And then I went and looked at child care centers. And there were lots of great ones, but I was like Italian mom, first kid. I was like, I'm not leaving my kid with people I didn't know. So I quit my very lucrative job in sales and started working in a after school program. And the rest is history. I have been in the field for 26 years now, running into a different season in my life where I want to help not just teach children, but adults as well. So I love talking about leadership. So excited to be able to talk about leadership on your platform today.
Awesome. You know, it's funny that you said you're an Italian mom because I had that same experience. My background is also Italian, and that's one of the reasons why I started childcare was because I couldn't see any good options for my kids out there, and I was pretty picky too. So we have a similar story there. So let's get started. Why do you think we're going to be talking about play in early childhood and play in early childhood leadership? So why do you think play is often misunderstood or undervalued in early learning programs, and especially maybe at higher levels?
Yeah. Wow, that's a good question. I don't know that it's always higher levels that don't understand play. I think it's parents' expectations of what they want their children to learn or what they think real teaching is. So being the administrator, a lot of times you are the one who has to explain to parents through tours, through education, through open houses. And I think that it isn't really necessary that leaders don't want play, because I think they do understand that play is extremely important. I do think it's the expectations that others kind of put on what teaching is supposed to look like. But we all know in early childhood education, play is how children learn. Honestly, I don't even know if it's just how children learn. I think it's how adults learn too.
I agree with that.
I do. I think hands-on, and there's lots of different ways to learn. Yeah, a lot of times hands-on. Sometimes you have to hear it. Sometimes you have to see it. Sometimes you have to model it. So I think it's important just to have those conversations right up front with your staff that come in too. Because sometimes I have staff that come in and they're very qualified, very experienced, but they want the 2-year-olds to act like they're 5-year-olds. So understanding, basic child development is extremely important. Why play is important at all levels. And once they turn 5, it doesn't mean all of a sudden they want to sit at a desk and, trace dittos all day. We just know that's not the best way. So I'm going to say education for all levels, for parents, for teachers, for admins, and just be transparent on how you use play in your program.
Right. I mean, I can definitely say I've been under that pressure as a childcare owner. A lot of times parents would come to me, even today, I did a parent survey just last month. And one of the comments on the parent survey was, I think you should be doing more worksheets and learning more academics per se, right? And I was shocked by the comment. I was like, you know what? We are teaching these kids so much. We're doing STEAM learning. We're doing language and literacy. We're doing it all through play, but they don't understand the value of play and how it translates into learning. So it's a constant education, a constant educating parents about what we do, how we do it, why we do it.
Yeah.
So there's definitely pressure, and sometimes you succumb to that pressure and say, okay, let's put our worksheet out there, right?
Yeah.
Because that's what they want.
I'm going to say in our state, and a lot of states have done this, but in my state, we have the Rhode Island Early Learning Standards. When they added development, now it's Rhode Island Early Learning and Development Standards. But they did a really great job in putting this document together and a whole framework together, which really does help you to be able to show parents this is what children should know and be able to do, and this is how we teach it. So you can teach letters, by tracing letters in sand. Doesn't have to be on a worksheet. It could be with Play-Doh. Let's make the letter A or B. So it's a really great document and framework that we're able to share with the greater public that doesn't maybe always understand what we're doing. And it was developed by a group of folks, including the Department of Education. So that little bit of a seal of, no, this is true, this is
Yes.
accurate, and this is how children learn, certainly is also very helpful.
Yeah, for sure. And we have something similar where I am as well. It's called Elect, Early Learning for
Mhm.
Every Child Today. And so we use that as well to show how our activities and what we plan aligns with those specific learning goals, right? But it's still there's still that disconnect somehow. I was just talking to somebody about this yesterday as well. She's doing some research into finding out how to get parents on board with learning through play. And she's getting, when the parents that she's speaking to, she's still getting a little bit of pushback, right? She's still getting a little bit of unawareness, I'd say. I think it's ignorance and unawareness rather than, they're just stuck in their ways. They're not understanding. We have to do a better job of educating parents, I think, even at government levels, things like that, so that they can understand the value of what we're doing.
Yeah. Transparency, especially during enrollment, is so important. And then keeping that conversation going through your parent newsletters, the resources that you send, even when you send photos, like make that connection for the parent and say, here's what we did in class today, here's the standard it meets, here was the intention, what the learning goals were and what the skill that the child developed from that activity will really go a long way.
Yeah, I think that was the key point there, the word you said, intention, right? Sometimes parents think play is just play, but
Yeah.
play with intent is very different, right? Like if we have intention in play
Hmm.
that specifically meets an objective or a learning goal, right? I think hopefully that helps them understand. And there are a lot of parents who do understand this,
Yeah.
but there's still more education to do for sure.
Yeah.
So let's get back to directors. What are some simple ways that directors or admin can coach their educators to go from supervising play to truly scaffolding and learning through play? So really getting involved in it and being playful.
Yeah. Well, role modeling for sure. That would be one thing that I would say. I love getting in the classrooms. It's actually my favorite place to be. So getting in the classrooms, really role modeling, especially for the staff that might not be as seasoned. Also doing observations. We get really busy in our to-do list that we have to really make sure that we are doing meaningful observations of the children in our classrooms and the teachers who are guiding them. I think that that's important. And then self-reflection too. Ask the teacher, I want you to, we're going to talk, and can you tell me how you're building on the skills that these children have through the activities that you're doing? Because I think when those conversations happen, that's where that intention happens, because then they start thinking about it. And if they know that's going to be part of your weekly conversations, they're going to make sure that they're really on it. But I think, role modeling, showing, making sure they have the skills. That's another thing. Um, Teachers tend to take trainings that are in the areas that they're comfortable with, are really strong in. So if somebody's not really strong in that area, make sure that their professional development plan really has them taking some courses that are going to support to bring them to that higher level.
Right. I like what you said about role modeling. I love going into the classroom and role modeling, and I love my supervisors to do that as well, to, be part of the classroom on occasion and, really role model that playfulness, right? We did an episode where we talked about silliness, right? Being silly. And, some educators might shy away from being silly, right? There may be fear of being judged or whatever. So I think that silliness leads to playfulness, right? Like when you walk
Hmm.
into a classroom and you can be silly and playful and not really too serious, right? Of course, learning is happening, but we can do it in a fun, playful way.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
know that you like to encourage that.
Yeah, and what's funny too is that sometimes you don't even have to say it, and teachers like, how do you get the kids to respond that way? I can walk in a room, they call me like the Pied Piper. I can walk in a room and say nothing, and those children, I mean, even if I'm in my office, the kids are like looking for me in the office because I'm fun. I am allowed because I'm Italian, but I'm fun, and they know that. And this is a place for children, so it should be fun. You set the tone as the leadership. If you're walking around stern and serious and you never smile, you never crack a joke, what is the tone in an environment that's supposed to be loving and nurturing and fun and be a place to make mistakes and feel safe to make those mistakes? You're not going to get that if everybody's walking around, stiff and, I, yeah, you're not going to get that kind of environment. So it really does
Mhm.
start with you as the leader.
Right. So let's talk a little bit more about that environment. So what does a playful learning environment actually look like, and how can directors support teams in transforming their spaces without those big budgets? We know that sometimes budgets might be the barrier. So if we don't have big budget, how can we make sure that our environment is playful, and what does that look like for you?
Well, Susie, we all know that you can take a cardboard box and some tape and make magic. So it's not a budget, it's an excuse, right? You don't need a big budget. Yeah, honestly, you need a very small budget. I think that looking at the materials, this is why observation is so important. Look at the materials that the kids are using in the classrooms and how they're using it. And then you really have a good idea of what you need more of, what you need less of. Also, if you don't have a big budget, you can rotate materials if you have multiple classrooms, as long as it's age appropriate. You can switch things up. Or even when you change the room around, this just happened to us 3 weeks ago. We were getting ready for that switch from the end of school year to summer camp. And literally, I bought nothing new except for one round table. I moved the room around. The kids came in. They were like, oh my God, wow, wow. They were so excited. They were so engaged. I'm like, I looked at the teacher and said, you do realize there's nothing in here different than a table? And she said, yes, I do, but I don't think they do. And, sometimes it's just switching up materials, the way you use the materials, see what the kids are really interested in. I think that goes a long way. Don't get too wrapped up about the budget. If you have a big budget, great. If you don't, that doesn't mean that you can't have a great learning environment. Some of the best learning environments use loose pots and open-ended play type of thing. So you don't need the newest $300 thing from Lakeshore on your shelf to run a high quality, fun, playful program.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
I find that, loose parts, definitely, I'm a big supporter of that. And I always tell my educators, because sometimes, they ask for things, they go through the catalogs and they're like, oh, it would be fun to have this in our classroom. And I'm like, well, how much value will that add to your room? Like, sure, for the first 5 minutes or so, children might play with it, but then they'll lose interest. I find that the things that generate the most interest are those everyday items. Like you bring spoon, a wooden spoon from home to add to your dramatic area.
Mhm.
Bring whatever. Like all of these loose parts or real items are the most fun. Those are the ones that the kids gravitate to. And like you said, you don't need a big budget for that. If everybody brings in a little bit, or in our area, we have something called Creative Zone, where educators can go there and get recycled things. So it's just
Mhm.
a big recycling depot where they can just pick up stuff
Yeah.
and use it in their classroom. And
Mhm.
you wouldn't believe the kind of stuff you get out of those places.
Yes, I would.
And no budget at all is required for that, just a little bit
Yeah.
of time and,
Yeah.
find some things that are interesting. And then I think what you said is important. It's how you put it out.
Mhm.
You could put the same things in a different way and
Mhm.
it's new, right?
Yeah.
So it's all about how you present it to the children. It's that invitation. And you can invite them to play with those materials in different ways. I
Yeah.
love that.
Yeah, and even if you have a budget, right, to make it stretch, maybe you buy one piece of like a light table, right? Those tend to be on the pricier side, and you rotate that through your school. Or if you have a small budget, you could do something like your sensory bin, your sand tables. Switch out the small things that are in that bin, which you could probably do for $10 at the dollar store, and add some different items in. And every week or every month, switch it out, and it will be fun and interesting again. So just get creative, I think, but really, really, really pay attention to what your kids like, what their interest is really important. And then also your observations on areas that you think that they need to build on. Do you have the right materials? So if your kids can't lace things, but you have no lacing cards or nothing that in that classroom that has the ability for them to learn that skill, then that's what you spend your money on.
We do a progress report twice a year, January and June. And in that progress report, we're evaluating the children's skills based on the elect, which is what we use here. And based on that, we can see trends, right? Like we could say, well, everyone in this classroom is missing, the skill of learning positioning, right? Like over, under, or something like that. Or everyone in this classroom doesn't understand money concepts or time concepts or whatever. So that can guide your process if you have some kind of like tool for like you said, observation or reporting, and you can find out where is there a gap? Where's the gap in learning, and then what materials can I use to fill that gap? I love that strategy. That's good
Yeah, and,
advice.
and don't forget the free things too, or the things that are like next to nothing. Like kids can learn so much from songs, from singing, the language development, right? That costs nothing. And I think the most important, I don't want to say thing, it's not a thing, the most important part of your environment is the teacher. Because you can have the best stuff. You can have a brand new classroom top to bottom, but if that teacher is not loving teaching and is not engaged, the kids are not going to learn. Where you can have the opposite of a room that doesn't have a lot of new things, has is full of tons of cardboard boxes, but has a teacher in there who's laughing and smiling and singing and asking children about what they're making and engaged with them. Those kids are going to learn, and they're going to feel confident.
Yes, I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
I always say educators are the heart of the system, right? Like
Mhm.
without them, it doesn't work. You
Amen.
can have
So,
the best facility,
yeah.
the best materials, but without the teachers, none of it comes together.
Yeah, so the admins that are listening to this today, leadership, you need to know that too. Get out of your office, support your staff, make sure they have the tools that they need. And give them a little love. When you're happy and smiling, they'll be happy and smiling. So it really does start with you.
Yeah. There's a lot to be said for recognition too, right? I mean, like just recognizing them, seeing them and feeling seen and heard is what they want for recognition. A lot of times, we give out recognition awards and things like that. But, a lot of times it's just, it's not the actual award that they wanted. It was the
Mhm.
fact that they were seen, they were heard, they felt valued, right? And that's what educators want.
Yeah. One of the biggest compliments which is going to sound silly, one of the biggest compliments to me, or was an aha moment, maybe it was more of an aha moment, is that a teacher was in a classroom one day, and I was walking out of my office, and she had just tied up the trash. And as I was walking out to my car, I grabbed the trash bag, I took it out to the trash dumpster. And when I came back in, she was like, had this look on her face. I'm like, you okay? She said, I have never in the 15 years I've worked at a center ever seen a childcare owner pick up a garbage bag and throw it out. And to me, no, but it was like, to me, I was like, that was crazy. But she was in awe that I would have done that. And I'm like, we're a team, aren't we? She said, yeah, I've just never experienced that. Something is like, and that was for me an aha moment because that's just who I am. I just figured everybody was that way, but I guess they're not. So sometimes it's not the pizza party, it's the little things you do for them.
I agree with that. I think that I would do every job, right? Like I'm mopping floors sometimes. I'll pick up the mop. We have a staff meeting. I'll mop the floor so we can quickly get to the staff meeting right after work. And the teacher would be looking at me, no, let me do it. I'm like, no, it's okay. I can handle this, right? Like, you can do anything and everything, and helping them and doing part of, what they're responsible for shows that, that you're a person. Yeah.
I think a really important practice is a job swap where maybe you go in the teacher's room for half a day and they do some of your admin stuff. Because I do think it gives people a chance to grow and also gives you a different perspective on what that person does daily. And I think it also helps you find any issues in the classroom that maybe the teacher hasn't shared with you or is afraid to share with you or hasn't recognized yet. So I think it's always great to do that, and it certainly builds your team and it builds morale. So that would be one thing I would say in terms of leadership.
I like that very much. So tell me about the balance between freedom and accountability. Obviously, we want to give educators a lot of freedom.
Mhm.
However, they're also accountable. Tell me how we strike that healthy balance as directors, how we balance between giving them, a lot of freedom, but also making sure they're accountable.
I think clear communication has to be number one. You have to let them know what they have free reign on, what is maybe not as loose, and sometimes not as loose, meaning it's got to fall within the school policies or state regulations, and giving a timeline. Timeline is important too. So if you say, can you do this project for me? You can't hold them accountable if you don't give them at least parameters of what you're expecting. So clear communication, I think, is really probably the key to everything. I would say I like to let my teachers kind of do what they want to do in their classrooms as long as we're meeting the expectations that we have set out for our program and meet the standards. Other than that, I say, do it your way.
Yeah. Yeah, as long as it goes with the philosophy of the program
Yeah.
and, it's aligned with your principles, how you want your center to be
Well, yeah.
known. Yeah, and
I,
run,
I,
right?
I think
Obviously,
I
it has
think
to
they
fall
shouldn't
within those
work.
parameters.
But let's talk about this because the last 4 or 5 years, people have been in a position where they maybe have hired bodies, right? We're going to just keep it really honest here. If those people, you have to have the right people working in your center to be able to do that. So you have to make sure that whoever you hire believes in your core values, your mission, right? If they don't, they shouldn't be working there. If you can't trust them to lead their class, they shouldn't have the position as a lead teacher,
Right. Yeah.
um so I think that just aligning, getting the right people in the right seats, and aligning people who follow your vision and mission will help alleviate a lot of that problem that you would have.
Yeah. Since we're being honest, let's dive into that for a little
Yeah.
minute because in my area, we are always in need of
Mhm.
what we call qualified staff. They have to have a certain designation, which is
Mhm.
registered early childhood educator. And those are hard to find, but there's always a shortage.
Mhm.
So for us, that bodies in the room thing is a real thing where
Mhm.
maybe it's not the right person. And you might have to figure that out and rectify that, right?
Yeah, I would definitely make sure before I gave any autonomy to somebody that they were able to do it, because I never want to set anybody up to fail either. So starting small, giving them one or two things that they have some freedom on, and then see how they do, instead of just being like, yeah, okay, you're free reign, and I'll check you with you next week. Give them a few small things that they can take some ownership, and then grow from there and build from there. And then also you have to understand as a leader, people are going to mess up. No one's perfect, and that's where growth happens. But you have to have that communication. You have to talk about it, figure out, just like we do with the students. How can I support you? You did really great here. Here's some areas you still struggled with. What do you need from me? How can I help you? And maybe you're not the right person. Maybe you have someone else on your team who can coach them better than you can. So
Yeah.
coaching programs, mentorship programs, all those things help grow your folks from within.
Yeah, and I like buddy systems. Like I like to pair a new educator with an experienced one.
Mm-hmm.
Especially I like to when I put educators into classrooms, I like to make sure that if I have somebody who's a little more serious, then I pair them with somebody who's a little bit more playful
Yeah.
so that they can balance each other out. Maybe one person is better with behavior management and the other one is better with planning activities. So, I work on those strengths of each of them and pair them together and make sure that everything's covered because I really think as much as us as directors can go in and role model, I think it's also the other educators who in the
Hmm.
room who are role modeling for each other, right?
Mm.
So if sometimes bad habits can start because of that, right?
Yeah.
Good habits as well as bad habits.
Yeah, and it's not, what I found. Actually hired a few new folks on my team in the last couple months. And it's so funny when you say like pair a seasoned person with a new person. I have found the new folks to be a breath of fresh air, because sometimes when you're at a place a long time, you get a little complacent or a little
Yeah,
just like right. And then you have this new person who comes in the room and they're like a dynamo and they're like, "Oh wait, are you gunning for my job?" But and sometimes it's a breath of fresh air to get some new folks in. We talk a lot about staff retention, but there's something to be said to having some fresh blood in the room. That's for sure.
I agree with that. And and that brings me to the issue of intergenerational, right? You have young people and you have older people, right? And different from different generations, like Gen X and Gen Z working together. And they have different views on life, right?
Mm-hmm.
And on work even. So it's interesting to see how that dynamic plays out. And I like, pairing that
Mm-hmm.
because I like that, the older person might bring a little bit more experience, and then the younger person might bring that freshness, that
Mm-hmm.
new ideas, new ways of doing things. So yeah, how do you feel that plays out?
I love it. My directors that I work with, one is my daughter who's 26. I talk about her a lot. We just had a conversation the other day. She was fixing the bookshelf, and I love books, and there's some books in there that are probably older than they should be. And she's like, "Mom, this is our teacher resource library. Some of these old things got to go. Some of these things can be digital. So we there's other resources, Mom, besides these books from 1980." And I'm like, "No, you're right. You're right." So I certainly have new books in there too, but she just looked at things a totally different way, and I think it's cool to get that different perspective. I was so proud of this library of 2,000 books. She pulled out one. She's like, "Mom, when's the last time someone used this book?" I'm like, "I don't know." She's like, "I'm going to tell you, it's been 10 years." So it's nice to get different perspectives. You got to take things with a grain of salt. You have to be open to new ideas. And my niece too, she's like one of those values time with family more than a position or money. Like instead of a raise, she'd rather have another week of vacation time.
Right.
So just understanding where the teachers are in their season of life, if you will, and what they really need from the program, and then you can really tailor the best ways to motivate folks.
Yeah. So we're coming to the end of the podcast. Is there anything else you wanted to share with our listeners about this topic of early childhood and leadership?
Leaders, I'd like to say you do set the tone of your school, and I think you setting the standard of what your vision looks like is the easiest way for people to get it. Hanging a poster on the wall is not going to help them. Putting it in your handbook is not going to help them. They need to see you emulating it every day, and not just in their classrooms, but in the work that you do as well. Right? As the administrator, are you always serious? Are you having a good time at the staff meeting? Are you making sure they have a good time? Is your staff meeting playful, or is it just a to-do list of who didn't do what problems, right? So think about what it is you want to see happen in your program. To leaders, I would say you set the tone, model what standards you expect, do it with excellence, do it with love, and have a good time.
That's wonderful. That's a great note to leave this podcast. How can people reach out to you if they want to learn more about what you do, Erica?
People can find me at CCDC Podcast, Child Care Directors Chair Podcast, or childcaredirectorschair.com. And of course, we have Facebook and Instagram. Same thing, Child Care Directors Chair. That's it.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here, Erica.
Thank
It's been a
you.
pleasure.
Bye bye.
Hello and welcome back. My talk with Erica was amazing, as usual. She is a wealth of information, especially for childhood education leaders. Those supervisors and directors out there, childcare owners, I feel this episode is really for you. It's how to ensure that your centers are a good place to be. They're playful, They're fun to come to. They're good to work at. And it starts with you, really. It starts with the leadership. It starts with you ensuring that you role model. You role model what you want to see. You role model that playful environment. You role model, the interactions you want to see with children. Are you going into the classrooms? Are you interacting with children and role modeling what you want other educators to do? I think it's important to do this. It's one thing to talk the talk, but you also have to walk the walk, right? You have to also do what you're saying you want to see done. So thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today. I hope that this was insightful for you and will help you to build an amazing early childhood education program. Thanks for tuning in to the ECE Classroom with Susie Beghin. For more information, you can visit our website at www.susiebeghin.com. Remember to rate, review, and subscribe to our podcast so you can stay up to date on the latest episodes. Thanks for listening.